A German shepherd became a real mother to two abandoned lion cubs that their own lioness mother had rejected. However, a few years later, something shocking happened. In a small wildlife sanctuary called White Lion, a lioness named Sirona had been living for about a year. On September 18, something wonderful happened. Sirona gave birth to two beautiful lion cubs of different sexes. However, these were her first births, and Sirona herself had barely survived a serious illness in the wild before being brought to the sanctuary. Because of this, she was very tense, distrustful, and insecure. All of this led to her maternal instinct never kicking in, and she rejected her own cubs. For 3 days, the sanctuary staff waited, hoping Sirona would finally develop a maternal instinct and start feeding her cubs. But it was all in vain. On the 4th day, the veterinarians took the cubs away from the lioness. The brother and sister were in a state of extreme exhaustion since Sirona had never fed them. The staff even feared the cubs might not survive. Fortunately, the veterinarians managed to feed both cubs a nutritious milk formula from a bottle, and within a week they looked much better, with their lives no longer in danger. However, the staff knew that formula alone wouldn't be enough. Without a mother and her milk, the cubs would grow up weak and frail, nothing like the graceful African predators they were meant to be, and their health would suffer. Luckily, a family from a nearby town agreed to bring their 8-year-old German shepherd, Sandra, to the sanctuary to help raise the cubs. Sandra had recently given birth to puppies and had plenty of nutritious milk. Veterinarians knew that dog milk was excellent for many animal species, including lion cubs, as it contained all the necessary components for their healthy development. When Sandra first entered the enclosure with the tiny lion cubs, the entire staff held their breath in tense silence. Fortunately, the dog accepted both cubs, and within minutes they were suckling milk from her. This allowed everyone to sigh in relief. The veterinarians were overjoyed. It was a rare case where an animal of one species accepted the young of another, especially a wild one. The most surprising thing was that Sandra had always hated cats and would bark at them relentlessly, yet with the lion cubs she immediately sensed they needed urgent help and soon became their adoptive mother. Of course, the cubs needed much more milk than regular puppies, but the vets weren't worried. Sandra had previously raised litters of 8 puppies at once, all on her own. This time she had only one puppy of her own, so feeding him along with the 2 lion cubs was no trouble. After a few weeks, the cubs had grown significantly in size and weight. The sanctuary staff supplemented their diet with a little more formula from bottles. The female cub was weaker than her brother, and at first her health worried the vets. But thanks to Sandra's care, she recovered and caught up in development. The cubs grew quickly, playing together under Sandra's constant supervision. She not only fed them but also licked them clean every day to prevent fungal or other infections. At night, she kept them warm with her own body. Several weeks later, the cubs had grown so much that they were even bigger than their adoptive mother. Their sharp fangs and claws now posed a danger to Sandra, so she was taken back home, while the cubs were moved to a spacious new enclosure where they thrived and continued to grow. The entire sanctuary staff was deeply grateful to Sandra for saving these 2 helpless creatures. Two years later, the cubs had grown into beautiful, graceful lions, a male and a female. Sandra's owner, at the invitation of the sanctuary director, brought her back to visit her adopted children. The German Shepherd stared at the majestic predators for a few moments, then suddenly ran into their enclosure. The staff froze, unsure how the lions who hadn't seen their adoptive mother in 2 years would react. Without hesitation, the lions approached Sandra. First, they sniffed her carefully, then instead of attacking, they rubbed against her with their thick fur and lay down beside her, as if feeling like small, helpless cubs again. Sandra began licking her grown-up adopted children, as if she had never forgotten them. The scene moved the sanctuary staff to tears. Even Sandra's owner was amazed at how strong the bond of love between a mother and her children could be, even when they belonged to completely different species.